What's happening right now in Syria may seem pretty irrelevant to Australians worrying about power bills, traffic jams, job prospects and how their children might afford a home. But it matters, not just because of its implications for the so-called rules-based global order, but because what happens in the Middle East has a horrible tendency to ensnare innocent people in faraway places like Australia because of the region's role in the breeding, training and funding of Islamic terrorism. Now, I can understand why Donald Trump thinks that the religious and ethnic squabbles of Syria are not worth further risks to US soldiers, having lost so many of their military in the area over the past 2 decades alone. And I can understand the isolationist impulse, always strong in America, to withdraw from the troubles of the wider world when so much of the world expects America to act like the globe's policeman, but then criticises them at almost every turn when they do. But there's a real lesson here for the real estate mogul turned president. Just because you don't want a war with anyone doesn't mean someone else won't want one with you. Trump's effective abandonment of America's steadfast Kurdish allies will have 2 immediate effects. First, it will diminish American prestige and badly undermine other allies' trust in the United States. And this has been picked up as a key concern by senior Republicans, even those on the president's side. And second, because the Kurds will now focus on fighting the Turks instead of guarding Islamic State prisoners, it's almost certain to free hundreds, if not thousands, of battle-hardened fighters, some of whom will turn or return their attention to the West. Think back to the aftermath of World War II. American money rebuilt Europe and Japan, and American soldiers guarded Western freedoms against communism. The global order that has enabled unprecedented prosperity and freedom relied on America to enforce its rules. Now relatively less rich and relatively less strong, it seems that America has had enough. Under Barack Obama, the retreat from leadership was disguised by globalist rhetoric, but while his words sounded great as president, his security outcomes were pretty much abysmal. Under Trump, this retreat has continued, and while he's better than Obama in that so far he's been able to de-escalate problem states like North Korea by walking away from the Middle East and Islamic State, captured but not defeated, I fear he's made a terrible error of judgment. In the short term, without a US cop on the beat, the world might be superficially safer for America. It's certainly cheaper in financial terms and in the lives of US soldiers, but without their presence, it's hardly going to be safer for anyone else, or indeed safer in the long run for Americans. Does anyone really think that Erdogan of Turkey, the president who's imprisoned thousands of journalists using a coup as an excuse, a coup many would argue, was manipulated to obliterate his enemy, is going to be a benevolent overlord in Syria? Does anyone really think that the freed Islamic State fighters will quietly just melt back to being farmers and shopkeepers, or that their jihadi brides and children will just bake bread and kick footies around and not try and recruit naive Australians online or make bombs, as they once did? There's a truism that politics abhors a vacuum, meaning that here and internationally, if there's a political vacuum, it will be filled. With the United States seemingly in retreat just at the time that China is flexing its military might and is in expansionist mode, as is Turkey, and look at Ukraine, as is Russia, does anyone really think that a world dominated by any of these players will be better than the one we have now? Unlike a lot of analysts on these sorts of issues, I'm not anti-Trump. But on this, I fear he's made a decision in haste and that the decision itself was a poor one. I was involved in Australia going in to fight Islamic State in the first place, almost 5 and a bit years ago. It was the right decision then. And while there is a time, of course, when our military should withdraw, how you do it and when you do it, well, that's what judgment and leadership are all about. To me, the timing here appears to be more about the US presidential race than Middle East reality, and that's the wrong time, the wrong way. Of course, we should be able to rely on the United Nations here, but we can't. It might have been precisely what the UN was first formed to do, to focus on peace and security issues. But it's now a vast global bureaucracy more interested in the climate rantings of a 16-year-old than the military attack of Kurdish people by invading Turkish tanks. Now, I fear this will all not end well, and that eventually even Donald Trump might discover that putting America first is no way to make America great. And it's certainly no way to keep the world as safe as we can make it.